Hey there, I'm April Norris. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Of course, they make me crazy. So, we're going live right now on Facebook. We're going live on YouTube. And joining me now is Dave Mowry. He went from homelessness from 1997 through 1998, and now he is a best-selling author in 2021. I love the name of his book, the author of OMG, That's Me. Isn't that cute? Hi, Dave.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. So I found you by Googling books on bipolar disorder. And I saw that you did or taught stand-up comedy. And I watched some of your videos, and then I just couldn't wait to reach out to you, hoping that you'd come on with me. But first, your books, and you have a couple more, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But they blossomed out of a couple of blogs that you did, and just about living with bipolar. And you got a huge following. And so start by telling me a little bit about that. Was it just something that you were just kind of doing for yourself as blog post and not really realizing the millions of people that started to become your followers?
I still write for bphope.com, and BP Hope is a magazine dealing with bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And I was asked to write a blog for them, just a single piece. And then it went well, and so they asked me to write. And over a couple of years, I wrote a blog piece every other week for a couple of years. And the response, the following, it was amazing. It surprised me. Most of the people said, I mean, that's where the name of the book, OMG, That's Me, came from, because people were saying, OMG, that's me. You're telling my story. I don't feel so alone now. And so I did that and wrote the book, took the blog post and put them in the book. And the book ended up being a bestseller on Amazon. It's still on the bestseller list in paperback. And I think yesterday it was number 2 in the Kindle store in the Bipolar.
Wow, that's awesome. Oh, yeah. Great. So when you were doing those blog posts, what were some of the things you were saying? Because I know you have bipolar disorder, and then you teasingly say, and so does my wife and my daughter, because or you live with it, and so do they, because they live with you, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. But so was it just you going through, was it you and kind of doing it in a way of a lighthearted, funny way, or were you getting serious? Because I haven't had a chance to look at those blog posts about the things that you struggle with.
Yeah, it was serious. And what I did was I went back to those dark days. I went in the hospital in 97, I think, and then got out. And like you said, the family was homeless for a year and a half. But after in 2010, I was able to go back and relive those experiences, relive my dark days. And as I relived my dark days, I just got back there and wrote about it from the perspective of being in it at that time. And those were, like I said, those were dark days. I call them my lost years, or 14 lost years. And so they were serious. There were a few lighthearted ones. I talked about mental illness being good for the environment, because when you're depressed, you don't take a shower. Like, it could be a couple of weeks, could be a month. And so you use less water, and then you don't take off your clothes to go to bed. You just sleep in your clothes. They're not doing laundry, so that's less water and detergent, and a few other things. So bipolar disorder, mental illness, depression, it's good for the environment. So when somebody asked me where I'd been after being out of sight for a while, I said I've been taking care of the environment.
And I love how you do. It's just kind of like you're so streamlined when you say it too. So you don't realize what's coming out of your mouth until it comes out. It's like you just say it so, it's like surprises you. And I'm sorry, Dave, I lost you for a moment, and I don't know if you lost me, but on my side, it went black. So, but I think I caught up with everything that you said. And so if somebody's watching this live and they're like, well, what is April doing? I was trying to make sure that it was going to come back. I was pulling out cords and putting them back in. But yeah, you did something funny too about, the bowl of cereal. You're like, you didn't really feel like eating. And when you did, it had to be something quick and easy. So it was a bowl of cereal. And
so there was no cooking, and I saved electricity and gas. It's a light way to look at the impact of depression and bipolar disorder, in that it doesn't have to be serious all the time. I mean, there are the dark days, there are the bad times. My manic times were the times that I live with. When I think about it, there's guilt and anxiety and regret, but it's a different kind of regret than the depression, which is a regret for not being able to do things, whereas the manic regrets are from when I did things that, frankly, most of them I'm never going to talk about because,
Yeah. I completely understand. Just as your book says, OMG, that's me, in the sense of just listening to your story about, not showering and really not having an appetite. But when you do have an appetite, you need something now and you want something quick. And it was me saying, OMG, that's my mom,
Yeah.
I lived with it. And during some of her manics, we don't really kind of want to talk about some of the things that she did either. You have to hold some things close. And I know that she lived with a lot of guilt for her illness. And I know that us as a family members, we lived with a lot of guilt from not really understanding everything that she was dealing with. And because she passed away 5 years ago. So I understand that completely. But I do love the humor side of things that you take. Because you were at one point, didn't you say you owned some businesses and you were really doing really well in life? And then is it when your bipolar kicked in that things started to kind of take a different direction for you? Or talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, as I got older, the highs got higher and the lows got lower. And I was a successful businessman. We had a net worth over $1 million. And then due to the bipolar disorder, as it got worse, we lost it all and ended up a couple $100,000 in debt. And like I said, homeless. And then I couldn't work. And my wife, Heather, she's a hero of my story. She held things together. And so yeah, success and business, and then losing it all and ending up homeless. And then now to being the author of some successful books, and I also run a small nonprofit here I live in Happy Valley, Oregon, which is interesting because I live with bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
But Happy Valley is really a misnomer. There is no valley.
Oh.
It's just happy. Took a second. Yeah. Yeah. And looking at the lighter side, I mean, it changed my life. When I'd have thoughts about my experiences, and I'd relive those dark days. And it's just what happened in my brain. And then when I took a stand-up comedy class and started doing the comedy. When I think of those situations, the pathways in my brain would change, and I'd think, where can I find the humor in that? Yeah. And I started to do that, and I started to find the humor, and it changed my life. It completely changed my life from ruminating and going into those dark days to making sense of some of those experiences and finding the humor in them. And then, they lost their power over me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why I connected so much with you, is because that is what I strive to do with this podcast. That's why I call it, Of Course They Make Me Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frickin' make me crazy,
Yeah.
because of some of the things that we've had to deal with, but some of the things that she did, and she and my grandma and it's fun. Some of the things are funny.
Right.
So she's, so I loved that about you. And I do think that, there's a story that I tell of, if we didn't start laughing, then it would just be a complete shit show, and I would just start to melt down and cry. Yeah. And so what would I rather be? Would I rather have a meltdown? And I might laugh, even when it feels inappropriate. And then later on down the road, I might have, a meltdown and cry and then laugh again. It's like, I'm up and down too.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for me, the kids, the family, the impact on my kids and my wife, Heather, are some of my biggest regrets or the hardest experiences to think about. But when I was first diagnosed, the family, we sat around the dinner table and we talked about it. And the next day, my daughter Megan went to school. And they had an art project. She was a first grader, and they had an art project, and she was drawing. And the teacher came up to her and said, "Oh, that's interesting, Megan. What are you drawing?" And Megan said, "It's a bipolar bear." And the teacher said, "Can you tell me about it?" And Megan said, "Well, it lives at the North Pole. It's white, and it eats Prozac."
I just love that. That's hysterical.
Yeah. And then my son David was a year younger, and he was drawing in class, and the teacher asked him what it was. And he said, "It's a picture of God." And the teacher said, "Well, nobody knows what God looks like." And David said, "They will in a minute."
I don't know if I necessarily understand that one, Dave.
Yeah. Well, he knew that what he was drawing was the real thing. So everybody's going to find out what God looked like after he was done.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh.
Yeah.
And so you even taught stand-up comedy to people with a mental illness. You did that for like 10 years, right?
Right. I took the stand-up comedy class, and in the comedy class, I had lots of experiences. It's based in reality. So I had lots of experiences, and who knew, but what I thought was funny, other people thought was funny too. So, and I was writing jokes. I was pretty prolific as writing jokes, and I helped other people in the class write jokes, and then they asked me to help them, outside of class. And I did, and we had a couple shows, and it went well, and people asked me to keep teaching or to teach, so I started teaching the comedy classes, and they went really well. I helped people write jokes. I helped people find the humor in the dark days, and not every person who took it had a significant change in their lives, but several people had changes in their lives and made a huge difference. And one of the people, she was a doctor, and she couldn't be a doctor anymore because of her bipolar disorder. So she had to quit her dream. And she came and took the comedy class. And after the comedy class and the show we always had after the comedy class, her mother came up to me and said, she was lost. And her mom thought she was going to commit suicide and be done. And then she found the stand-up comedy and found a purpose, and it saved her life.
Wow.
So it's, it has a huge impact on changing our perspective, and, finding the humor and being able to laugh about these experiences makes it bearable.
Well, and it speaks volumes and volumes of the character of yourself and the people that can get up on stage and even admit that they do struggle with it and do have it. And then on top of that, be funny about it and speak in front of people and make them laugh. And it's, it's just, that takes a lot of character, and it takes a lot of balls, and it takes a lot of, and so, yeah, that's pretty crazy. Kind of like a Robin Williams kind of thing in a way, He, always said that, through his pain is he wanted to make other people laugh. And I love that you say, because you said you taught stand-up comedy to folks with a mental illness for 10 years, including forensic patients at the Oregon State Hospital. So you can say that you taught stand-up comedy to the criminally insane.
Exactly. And so it's kind of like, can I say criminally insane? Can I make humor out of that? But, there is humor in that. And the people down at the Oregon State Hospital and the that were locked in there for pleading guilty, but for insanity. I found that a lot of them were regular folks, and a couple of them really needed to be there, but some of the other people were just regular folks, and we found humanity. There was one guy who obsessed about suicide, and it reminded me of when I was thinking about he was thinking about suicide, but the next week after finding the humor in it, he came to me and he said, I know I'm getting better because now when I picture myself jumping off the bridge, I'm wearing a floaty.
That's so cute.
Yeah. He also said he couldn't decide whether to be buried or cremated, so his headstone was going to say rest in pieces.
And that was him coming up with that.
Yeah, he came up with that one.
Oh.
And then there's suicide is people. We had a kind of a reunion and joke writing session with some of the original people, or some of the people that really flourished in the comedy class, and all of us had suicidal ideations, all of us, and all of us had thought about, if we were going to take our life, how we'd do it, but none of us had acted on it.
Yeah.
So, that's just something that's there, and it's very serious. But, you can look at suicide, and suicide's not funny.
No.
Except when it is. There was a time when things were really tough, and I was really down, and I decided to end it all. So I went into the bathroom and I took a bunch of pills. And afterwards, I called my wife for help. She said there are more pills under the sink.
Yeah. And you're like, well, damn it, you're not supposed to say
that. Yeah. Very helpful. Very helpful.
You're so funny. You're so funny. Well, and then so let's talk about, you have OMG, That's Me Too coming out, and you're collaborating with an author named Julie Fast on that. Is that correct?
Yes. And Julie's a best-selling author in the bipolar category. She's got 5 books, always 5 in the top 50, and she does really well. And she was also did blogging for BP Hope, and she they've been read by over 5 million people. And she's a successful author in her own right. And so what we did is we took the model of the OMG, That's Me, and used her writings, and I organized it, chose which blog posts, which ones to put in, wrote an introduction, and then we published that. We published that a couple months ago, and it's doing really well. But it was great to work with Julie. She's amazing. She was the original consultant for Claire Danes on the Homeland series, movie Homeland on HBO.
Yeah.
So it's a great book, and the OMG That's Me, OMG That's Me 2 are they're not completely serious, but you can read them and you relate because they're true experiences, and you dig deep to find them and you talk about them. And
would you say that those books, I'm sorry not to cut you off, but would you say those books would be helpful for family members or a spouse or,
Yeah,
okay.
definitely. A lot of the comments, the reviews that I've got and on Amazon for the OMG, that's me, are from people some from family members, and some from people living with mental illness that said, I gave this to my mom and it brought tears to her eyes, and she said, finally I understand. I know what's going on. And that made a huge impact on her and her daughter. So it's definitely a read. It should be read by everybody that lives with bipolar disorder or a mental illness, their family members. And I've had professional, psychiatrists, psychologists, family doctors read it, and they recommend it and hand it out in their offices. And they really, you can't learn these things in school. You can't learn them in medical school.
Yeah.
You can do all that, but unless you really listen and see what someone with a mental illness is going through and their experiences, you just can't understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's who you should read it. Individual, peers, family members, and the medical community.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad. I can't wait to read it. And and then you and Julie are going to be doing a revision of your first book called No, Really, We Want You to Laugh. And so when will that one come out?
That one's going to come out next month, the end of next
Okay.
month. And it's actually with co-author Tara Rolstad. So OMG2 is with Julie.
Oh,
And
okay.
then OMG3, which is a revision of No, Really, We Want You to Laugh, which talks about the 5 people, actually 6 people that did a comedy class, not necessarily at the same time. One is a family member, and one is me, and the other 4 are folks that live with mental illness. And we tell their stories, but we intersperse it with the jokes that they wrote and the humor that's in there. And so there's a lot of humor in it. You read it and you get the serious part, you get the reality, and you get to have the compassion for the folks that are telling their stories, or that we're telling their stories. But you also get the humor, and you can laugh at it, and you can see how they laugh at it. And
Yeah.
it's their experience with taking the class and performing. And it takes a huge amount of courage. In the comedy class, there's always somebody that says, I'm going to take the class and do all the work, but I'm never going to get up on stage and perform.
Oh,
And
yeah.
of course, that was okay. But through all the comedy classes, by the time they end with the class and they've written the jokes, and the jokes are laugh out loud funny, we don't tell any that aren't. They're laugh out loud funny, and they get up on stage and they tell their story one joke at a time. And when they come down, they say, when can I do it again?
That's awesome. I love that. I'm getting emotional. You probably see my eyes. It's because my mom and grandma loved to laugh. And I know, as serious as this topic is, they would have loved to hear that. They would have loved to hear your stories, and they would have loved to hear your take on it. I mean, even the bipolar bear, she would have laughed her ass off on that one. So, because Prozac was her favorite.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, and it's a huge stigma buster, because you've got, we had a show at Helium Comedy Club here in Portland, and we sold out. I can't remember if it was 140 or 180 people, but it was one less than capacity, one person less than capacity. But we went up and we did an hour and 45-minute show, and it was great fun. People laughed. The comics felt great, and it's a huge stigma buster, because
is there a video that somebody can go to that I can link to where they can see? I know you have some short clips on your website, which I'll link in the show notes of this. But is there a YouTube or anything that we can go to watch those clips, or your show?
What I'll do is I have some videos, and they're in my
Okay.
Dropbox, and I'll share them with you.
Okay.
And I'll just share most of what I have because it's video from our performance at Portland Center Stage, which is
Okay.
one of the big venues here in Portland. Great sound, and you really get a sense for what's going on. So I'll share those videos with you. You can pick and choose which ones you want to share with your audience.
Perfect. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, we'll wrap this up, guys. I know you're a busy man. You got things to do, and we are on we're on our timeline, and we're
Okay.
at the end of it. So again, I will link where people can find you. Are you on Instagram, Dave?
I'm not yet.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm not yet.
that's
I'm
okay.
on Facebook.
You're on Facebook and you have a
Mhm.
website. So I'll make sure that people can connect with you if they need to. And thank you for spending this time with us.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Take care.
You take care. Bye-bye.